Welcome to the Weight Pull Podcast. Strength, pull, passion.
Pound for pound record timelines. The story of Nordic Weight Pull through the evolution of records. From the pioneer years to modern records. Behind every number in a pound for pound timeline lies countless of hours of training, strong partnership between dog and handler, and the endless pursuit of the next level. Together, these record tables tell a story of how Nordic Weight Pull has evolved. From small competitions with only a handful of enthusiasts into established sport where records continue to fall year after year. When the first competitions were held across the Nordic countries, the sport was driven by a true pioneer spirit. The equipment was simpler, experience was limited, and success depended largely on determination, curiosity, and a strong sense of community. Handlers experimented with training methods, harness designs, different training track surfaces, and competition formats, all in an effort to discover what their dogs were truly capable of. What made the sport special from the very beginning was the partnership between dog and handler. Weight pull has never been just about the weight on the cart or the numbers results sheet. It's about trust, motivation, and the unique joy of working together when a dog truly loves the challenge ahead. Over the years, the sport has evolved tremendously. Knowledge about training, recovery, and technique has expanded. Competitions have grown larger, and record performances have reached levels that few people believed possible during the early years. Yet the heart of the sport remains exactly the same. The same anticipation before the start, the same silence in the final seconds before the pull begins. The same feeling when a dog leans into the harness and gives everything it has. For nearly 2 decades, different breeds, handlers, and nations have all left their mark on the sport. Every record represents far more than raw strength. It represents technique, mental resilience, endurance, and the unique determination of dogs that simply love to work. These timelines are far more than a collection of results. They have become a living history book of Nordic Weight Pull. And the people and the dogs who have built the sport generation after generation. The little giants. When you look at the evolution of the -5 kilogram class, it's impossible not to be impressed by just how dramatically the records have progressed. From Walter's first record in 2019 to Lycke's dominance just a few years later. The class tells the story of a sport evolving at an incredible pace. Time and time again, the smallest weight class has challenged everything people thought they knew about what small dogs are capable of. For anyone who never watched the weight pull competition, it's difficult to imagine how much power, focus, and determination can exist inside such a small body. But that's exactly what makes the -5 kilogram class one of the most fascinating parts of the sport. Here, performances depends just as much on explosiveness and mentality as it does on physical strength. Every kilogram moved demands absolute concentration, perfect technique, and dogs with an extraordinary desire to work. Walter took the first major step forward, setting the standard throughout 2019. Only a few months later, Norway's Tia raised the bar dramatically, making the beginning of a new era, where progress accelerated faster than ever before. But it was the miniature pinscher Lykke who truly became the defining icon of the class. Between 2022 and 2024, the record were pushed higher, again and again, until it finally reached an astonishing 163.08 pound for pound. Numbers that only a few years earlier would have seemed almost incredible for a dog that size. Lykke's remarkable run of records became a symbol of the sport itself. It demonstrated how modern training, experience, and years of accumulated knowledge had transformed the level of Nordic weight pull. Perhaps more clearly than any other weight class, this one proves that weight pull has never been about size alone. Heart, drive, and a willingness to work matters just as much, maybe even more. That's why the 5 kilo class so often leaves the strongest impressions on the crowd. Because when the smallest dog walks to the cart and pulls weight far beyond what anyone believed is possible, that's when the sport becomes truly spectacular. Terrier heart and explosive power. The minus 10 kilogram class brings together several terrier breeds and some of the sport's smallest powerhouses, creating one of the most colorful record histories in Nordic weight pull. This is a class where explosiveness often matters more than size. The dogs work with incredible speed, relentless intensity, and a level of drive that makes every single pull a thrill to watch. Many of the teams competing in this class have become crowd favorites, not because they are biggest, but because of the energy, determination, and heart they bring onto the track. Bosse laid the foundation during the early years, becoming an important part of the class' first stage of development. The records were carried forward by dogs like Tonic and Morris, proving that the journey had only just begun. When Norway's Alma entered the record books, the standard was raised once again. Her performance reflected how the sport had become more professional, and how training methods had evolved to maximize both technique and strength in smaller dogs. So afterward, Alfred continued that progression, helping transforming the minus 10 kilogram class into one of the most competitive in Nordic weight pull. But above all, it was the Terrier Brasileiro female P who changed everything during the summer of 2019. With a remarkable performance of 137.12 pound for pound, she revealed the extraordinary potential of explosive, athletic terrier breeds. P's record quickly became one of the biggest talking points in the Nordic weight pull. Not only because of the number itself, but because of the way it was achieved. The combination of explosive acceleration, absolute focus, and genuine joy for work made the team a perfect example of what modern weight pull had become. Today, the minus 10 kilo class stands as proof that technique, quick acceleration, and an unstoppable work ethic can compete with pure physical strength. In many sports, strength is associated with size, but the minus 10 kilo class continues to prove, year after year, that determination, explosive power, and the partnership between dog and handler can produce performances that feel far greater than the dogs themselves. The era of the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. Few weight classes have been shaped so completely by a single breed as the minus 15 kilogram class has been shaped by the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. For many years, the Staffordshire Bull Terrier became synonymous with explosive power, enthusiasm for the work, and an uncompromising desire to pull. Its combination of compact strength, lightning-fast acceleration, and exceptional mental resilience made the breed a natural force within the class. The story begins with Humla. Throughout 2011, she pushed the record higher again and again, with multiple records in a single season. She established a new benchmark for what a Staffordshire Bull Terrier could achieve at the highest level. Humla's success also helped shape the future of the sport itself. She inspired more handlers to invest serious in the class, and demonstrated just how competitive the breed could become in the modern pound-for-pound weight pull. In the years that followed, dogs like Lexi and Athene continued the progression. Each new record moved the sport forward, raising the standard for every generation that followed. Then came Bella. During the record-breaking weekend of 2019, she pushed the class another significant step forward. Her performances highlighted just how rapidly the sport had evolved throughout the 2010s. As better training methods, greater experience, and improved preparations drove record performances to entirely new levels. But despite all the remarkable dogs that came before, it was Papel who truly rewrote the modern history of the class. In the summer of 2024, the previous record was surpassed by a remarkable margin, as the team reached an incredible 160.80 pound for pound. That performance became far more than just another statistic. It became proof of how far Nordic Weight Pull had come since the pioneer years and how much potential still remains. Today, the minus 15 kilo class has become one of the defining symbols of the modern Nordic Weight Pull. A place where tradition, innovation, and extraordinary performance come together, and where every new generation continues to push the limits just a little further. A class built on rivalries. The minus 20 kilo class is one of the most iconic and fiercely competitive weight classes in Nordic Weight Pull. Here, different breeds, different nations, and different generations meet in a single timeline. Spanning more than 15 years of record-breaking performances, for decades, the class has served as a stage for some of the sport's greater rivalries. The most memorable achievements during the early years, dogs like Leonard, Devil, and Hera laid the foundation. The records climbed steadily, while the sport itself continued to grow, both competitively and organizationally, but above all, one dog came to define the entire era. The Finnish Staffordshire Bull Terrier, Ruben. Season after season, his name appeared again and again at the top of the record lists. His team became synonymous with consistency, strength, and an extraordinary ability to perform at the highest level. Yet Ruben represented far more than individual records. He became proof that patience, experience, and long-term dedication could produce lasting success. But the competition never stood still. Dogs like Frodo and Orion continued closing the gap, showing that more teams were ready to challenge the top. Then came Bazooka, making it clear that the new generation had arrived, and the sport entered the 2020s. The records began moving once again. Norway's Ivy and later Alaya pushed the class to entirely new heights. Their performances mark the beginning of another chapter, where advances in training, technique, and athletic performance raised the standard once again. Today, the minus 20 kilo class captures the very essence of Nordic Weight Pull. Long-standing rivalries, international competition, and records that have steadily moved far beyond what once seemed possible. Power, diversity, and new icons. The minus 25 kilo class showcased the diversity of Nordic Weight Pull perhaps better than any other. Here, American Pit Bull Terriers, American Staffordshire Terriers, and mixed breeds and Staffordshire Bull Terriers all share the same record timeline. It's a class where every different dog have reached success through very different strength. Some teams built their performances on explosive speed and lightning-fast acceleration. Others relied on raw power, endurance, and relentless determination. In the early years, one name stood above the rest: Plexi. She quickly became the dominant force within the class, setting multiple records during the sport's formative years. For a time, her name was almost synonymous with the minus 25 kilo class, establishing a benchmark that many teams would spend years trying to surpass. As the sport continued to grow, dogs like Brook, Dixie, and Kiki D carried the records forward, demonstrating that Nordic Weight Pull was expanding, not only across nations, but across breeds as well. Then came Suki, crossing the milestone of 80 pound for pound, marking another defining moment of the class history. The records were now reaching levels that the earliest generation could hardly have imagined. In the modern era, it was Pansau who truly left his mark on history. By pushing the record well beyond the achievements of previous generations, Pansau became a symbol of Nordic Weight Pull, a sport built on greater experience, better training, stronger preparations, and more competitive teams than ever before. The minus 25 kilo class perfectly illustrates how the sports continue to evolve, not only through improved knowledge and better conditioning, but also through broader participation, greater diversity, and an ever-growing community. Perhaps that's what makes the class so unique. It proves that there is never just one path to success. Different breeds, different strength, different approaches, but one shared goal: to move the records just a little further. One of the sport's most iconic classes. The minus 30 kilo class is home to some of the most legendary names in Nordic Weight Pull. For many within the sport, this has always been one of the most prestigious weight classes. The combination of strength, speed, and technical precision has consistently produced some of the most spectacular performances and fiercest competitions. From Turbo and Gaggio to Nitro, Helmer, and finally Aske. The entire modern evolution of the sport can be followed through a single timeline. During the earlier years, the records advanced steadily, with each generation pushing the limit a little further. Dogs like Lily, Bobby, and Nitro helped establish the minus 30 kilo class as one of the most competitive in Nordic Weight Pull. As the years passed, Helmer and later Freddy joined the record books, making it clear just how far the sport had progressed. Training methods had become more advanced, experience continued to grow, competitions became larger, and both handlers and dogs reached new levels of preparation and performance. Then came Asker. During the 2020s, his name changed the class completely. With multiple records in a remarkable short period of time, Asker pushed the sport to entirely new heights, showing what modern training, years of experience, and exceptional teamwork could truly accomplish. Perhaps even more impressive was the consistency. Again and again, the record moved higher. Each new performance became another reminder that the sport was still evolving, still improving, still accelerating. The minus 30 kilo class also tells another story. It reflects the evolution of the sport itself. Both rails and dirt have played defining roles throughout its history, demonstrating how different surfaces demand different skills, different techniques, and different kinds of championship performances. Today, the minus 30 kilo class stands as one of the clearest symbols of Nordic Weight Pull, a class defined by history, driven by competition, and united by the endless pursuit of the next record. From the pioneers to triple-digit records. The story of the minus 37 kilo class begins in 2008 with a Danish dog named Zoe. Time after time she pushed the record forward, during a period where Nordic Weight Pull was still finding its identity. The sport was growing rapidly. Every new record represented a major step forward. Competitions were smaller, experience was limited, and success was built on pioneering spirit, passion, and the shared belief in what the sport could become. Zoe quickly established herself as one of the greatest names in the class, demonstrating the potential of modern pound-for-pound weight pull. As the year passed, the story continued through dogs like Stoma, Nala, and Roxy, before Flash and later Ove carried the class into the modern era. Each new generation built upon the achievements of the one before. Records that once seemed untouchable gradually became the new standard. As the sport matured, so did the athletes. Training became more structured, knowledge expanded, competition intensified, and nowhere was that more evident than when the performances of Flash and Ove, who pushed the records to entirely new heights. But the defining moment became when Norway's Maximus crossed the magical milestone of 100 pound for pound. It marked the beginning of a new generation of records performances and became one of the most significant moments in the history of the class. Perhaps no other timeline captures the evolution of Nordic Weight Pull quite as clearly. From pioneering beginnings to world-class performances, from passion to precision, from ambition to achievement. Yet, despite all the progress, the heart of the sport remains unchanged. The desire to improve, the courage to compete, and determination to keep pushing the limits, together with our dogs. A short history packed with progress. Despite having a relatively short record timeline, the minus 44 kilo class has delivered some of the biggest leaps. The most impressive progress in Nordic Weight Pull. It may not have produced as many record holders as some of the other weight classes, but every new generation has taken the sport a significant step forward. The story begins with Sisla, who set the early standard with multiple records throughout 2013. During those years, the class established itself as a true part of Nordic Weight Pull, gradually finding its own identity. Soon afterwards, Norway Storm continued the progression, demonstrating just how quickly the level could change when a new team stepped onto the track. A few years later, Remo carried the class forward, helping keep the momentum alive during a period where the sport itself was growing rapidly. But above all, one name changed the history of the class forever: Neon. During just 2 days in the summer of 2022, the record jumped from 81.29 to 100.59 pound for pound. One of the most dramatic improvements ever seen within a single weight class. It became a defining symbol of a modern era Nordic weight pull. Proof of how dramatically the level of the sport had evolved since the early years. And perhaps the most exciting part is that this story is only just beginning. Although the class is still relatively young, its future appears brighter than ever before. New class, new breeds, new records. The minus 51 kilo class shows how Nordic weight pull has evolved into a sport for an ever-growing variety of working dogs. Here, Cane Corsos, American Bulldogs, mixed breeds, and other powerful working dogs share the same record history. It's a class that stands out both visually and competitively. The story begins with Diablo and Midas, who took the very first steps in building the class's history. Soon afterwards, Finland's Tanki continued the progression, moving the standard steadily forward. But it was Chanel who truly established a new era. Throughout 2016, multiple records performances set an entirely new benchmark, raising the class to a level that remained untouched for many years. Chanel also became a perfect example of how larger dogs could combine raw strength, technical precision, and remarkable consistency at the highest level. Then came Birka. As Birka entered the record books, the pace of development accelerated once again. Between 2024 and 2025, the record climbed dramatically, showing that Nordic weight pull continues to evolve at an impressive pace. Perhaps even more importantly, the class suggests that the greatest performances may still lie ahead. The rapid progression of recent years point toward a future where today's records may once again become tomorrow's milestones. At the same time, the minus 51 kilo class perfectly illustrates how diverse weight pull has become. Different breeds, different body types, different strength, yet every successful team shares a very same foundation: dedication, preparation, and the partnership between dog and handler. The heavyweights. In the heaviest weight class, everything revolves around raw strength, stability, and the ability to move truly extraordinary loads. Here, massive breeds such as Dog de Bordeaux, Bull Mastiff type dogs, and powerful mixed breeds share the spotlights. There are teams that command attention long before the pull begins. Yet despite their size, success at this level demands far more than brute strength alone. It requires discipline, precision, control, and complete trust between dog and handler. The story begins with Cassius, who laid the foundation during 2013 and became an important part of the class's early development. But soon afterwards, everything changed. Hooch rewrote the record books. Within only a few months, the record levels almost doubled. One of the most dramatic leaps ever witnessed in any Nordic weight pull weight class. Hooch proved that even the largest dogs could combine immense power, surprising speed, and refined technique in ways few had imagined possible. As the sport entered a new era towards the end of the 2010s, the next generation stepped forward. First Chanel and later Sasa continued pushing the records higher, demonstrating that even the heaviest classes could continue to evolve, that the limits have still not been reached. There are performances that demand exceptional physical strength, but also discipline, technical precision, and an extraordinary partnership between dog and handler. Perhaps nowhere is the power of weight pull more visually impressive than here. When the biggest teams lean into the harness and set several tons in motion, weight pull becomes something that simply has to be experienced, to be fully understood. The pursuit of the ultimate record. If the individual weight classes tell a story of each category's evolution, the overall pound-for-pound record timeline tells the story of the sport itself. Here there are no weight limits, no separated classes, only one objective: to earn a place in the absolute record books. Since the very first competition were held across the Nordic countries, generation after generation of remarkable dogs has continued to redefine what once seemed possible. Every new record had become more than just another number. It has become proof that the sport continues to evolve, that knowledge continues to grow, and that the partnership between dog and handler continue to reach new levels. From the pioneers to the first great champions. The story begins in 2008, during a time when Nordic Weight Pull was still taking shape. One dog quickly emerged as one of the sport's first true icons. The American Pit Bull Terrier Plexi. Throughout those early years, her name appeared again and again at the top of the record list. She became the very symbol of the pioneering spirit that defined the sport's earliest era. At the same time, the Bull Terrier Lennart wrote his own chapter in the history books, proving that excellence was never limited to a single breed. It was an era where every new record represented a major breakthrough. Experience was still limited. Many of today's training methods, competition strategies, and technical knowledge had yet to be discovered. Every competition became an opportunity to learn something new. Every record laid another stone in the foundation of the sport we know today. A sport in rapid evolution. As the year passed, the records continued to rise. In 2010, the American Staffordshire Terrier Hera moved the sport another step forward. Then, in 2010, the Staffordshire Bull Terrier Humla ushered in an entirely new era. Her performance raised the standard once again. It was also during this period the rails began to play an increasingly important role in record development. The sport became more diverse, more refined, more competitive. Handlers gained experience, training methods evolved, and every new season pushed the limits a little further. Then came the Finnish Staffordshire Bull Terrier Ruben. For several seasons, his name dominated the record list. Again and again, he pushed the ultimate record to new heights. Ruben established himself as one of the most successful teams in the history of Nordic Weight Pull. It became known for consistency, strength, and extraordinary ability to perform year after year. His success was never built on a single remarkable performance. It was built throughout dedication, preparation, experience, and the ability to deliver at the highest level time after time. By now, the sport itself had changed dramatically. More competitions were being organized, more handlers entered the sport, new knowledge was being shared, and the level of competition continued to rise. Nordic Weight Pull was no longer a small community of passionate pioneers. It had become a mature and highly competitive sport. The international era. By the middle of the 2010s, the record timeline has taken a truly international character. Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark, each nation contributed its own remarkable dogs, its own champions, and its own chapter to the history of Nordic Weight Pull. The rivalry between the Nordic countries became one of the driving forces behind the sport's rapid development. Every new competition pushed the standard a little higher. Every new record inspired another team to aim even further. It was an era defined not only by stronger performances, but by greater knowledge, better preparations, and a growling belief that almost anything was possible. Dogs like Lexi, Athene, Orion, and Alma represented a new generation, a generation where experience, modern training, and unwavering dedication combined to produce performances that earlier competitions could scarcely have imagined. Then came another milestone. After Alfred surpassed 109 pound for pound, it became clear that Nordic Weight Pull had entered yet another chapter. The ceiling had moved again. That once appeared to be the limit was now only another step on the journey. Looking back, this period was about much more than records alone. It was the moment the Nordic Weight Pull truly became a shared Nordic sport. One community, one passion, united by a common pursuit to discover just how far dog and handler could get together. The Great Leap. The summer of 2019 delivered one of the most remarkable moments in the history of Nordic Weight Pull. A female Terrier Brasileiro named P. On the opening day of competition, she set a brand new overall pound-for-pound record. For most teams, that alone would have been enough, but P wasn't finished. Just 24 hours later, she returned to the track, another pull, another opportunity, another chance to redefine what was possible. When the cart stopped, the record broke. The record books had changed forever. 137.12 pound for pound, one of the largest single jumps ever recorded in the history of the overall pound for pound timeline. The number itself was extraordinary, but it wasn't what people remember the most. They remembered how it happened. The explosive start, the unwavering focus, the determination, the effortless rhythm between dog and handler. Everything came together in one unforgettable performance. P proved something that the sport had been quietly teaching for years. Weight pull has never been about size alone. It has always been about potential, about preparation, about trust, and about the extraordinary things that become possible when a dog loves to work. P's performance became more than just another record. It became a turning point, a moment that inspired handlers across the Nordic countries to believe that the impossible might simply be waiting to be challenged. For a while, it seemed the ceiling had finally been reached, but history wasn't finished yet. The revolution of the small giants. During the 2020s, the evolution of Nordic Weight Pull took a step that very few could have imagined. In the summer of 2022, a Norwegian miniature pinscher named Lykke entered the overall pound-for-pound record timeline. It immediately caught attention far beyond her own weight class, because this wasn't just another record. It challenged one of the oldest beliefs within the sport. Could a dog from the -5 kilogram class really compete with and eventually surpass dogs 10 times its size? For many, the answer has been no. Lykke changed that forever. But she wasn't satisfied with reaching the record books. She came back again and again, season after season. The record continued to climb. Throughout 2022, 2023, and 2024, she kept raising the standard, established herself as one of the most successful dogs in the history of Nordic Weight Pull. Her performances combined explosive acceleration, extraordinary focus, remarkable consistency, and an unbreakable desire to work. Yet perhaps her greatest achievement wasn't the record itself. It was what the record represented. For decades, pound for pound had always been built on a simple idea. Performance should be measured relative to body size, not body size. For years, the principle had existed on paper. Lykke proved it on the track. Then came the summer of 2024. First, the Staffordshire Bull Terrier Papel crossed the magical barrier of 150 pound for pounds. It was a historical achievement, one that many believed would stand for years. But history had other plans. Just one day later, Lykke returned to the track. One more pull, one more opportunity, one more chance to redefine the impossible. When the cart finally stopped, the entire sport stood still. 163.08 pound for pound. The highest pound for pound performance ever recorded in Nordic Weight Pull. On many levels, the single performance represented nearly 2 decades of progression. From pioneering competitions to international championships, from homemade equipment to world-class preparations. From ambitious dreams to performances once believed to be impossible. But perhaps Lykke's story teaches us something even greater. Weight pull has never been about body size, not about breed, not even about weight. It has always been about heart, about trust, about willingness to work. And sometimes the greatest performances comes from the smallest dogs. More than just records. When you look at the entire timeline together, it becomes clear that Nordic Weight Pull has always been about more than numbers on a record sheet. It's about dogs that simply love to work, about handlers that have invested thousands of hours into training, traveling, and competing, about friendships that have crossed clubs, borders, and generations, and about a community that continues to grow stronger with every new team that steps onto the track. Every record represents far more than a performance. Behind every number is a story of dedication, patience, teamwork, and the remarkable bond that exists between dog and handler. Records that once seemed untouchable have gradually become the new standard, and every generation has built upon the achievements of those who came before. Perhaps that's what makes this story so special, because even though many legendary names have already secured their place in the history books, the story is far from over. Somewhere right now, another team is training, another handler is dreaming, another dog is learning to trust the harness, preparing for the moment when everything comes together. The next record, the next champion, the next chapter in the history of Nordic Weight Pull, because records will always be broken, but the legacy they leave behind belongs to everyone who helped build the sport. Every pull, every record, every regeneration, part of the legacy. If you enjoy what we are doing here on the podcast and want to help keep it going, there's a few simple ways you can support us. First of all, make sure you follow the channel wherever you watch or listen. On YouTube, subscribe and turn on notifications. And on Spotify, follow the podcast so you never miss an upcoming episode. It helps more than you think because it allows more people to discover the show and helps the podcast to continue to grow. If you would like to take your support one step further, you can also become a supporter through Patreon. By doing so, you help fund the podcast development, future projects, and all the work that happens behind the scenes. Every contribution, big or small, truly makes a difference. Running a podcast is about more than recording conversation. It involves planning, research, editing, technical work, and a significant amount of time. With your support, we can continue creating content that engages, inspires, and shines a light on the sport and the people around it. So if you appreciate the podcast and want to be a part of the journey ahead, follow, share, and support us on Patreon. Thank you for listening, watching, and being a part of building this together with us.